Broadcasting from the Civic Cipher studios, welcome to the QR Code, where we share perspective, seek understanding, and shape outcomes. I am Ramses Ja.
And I am Q Ward.
And we want you to stick around because today we are going to be talking about an interesting weekend that we went through. We are definitely going to be talking about the nationwide protest, the No Kings protest, that sort of coincided with Trump's military parade. But one of the things about this past weekend that we were fortunate enough to be able to partake in is the protest in Phoenix, Arizona. And, Q and I were both in Los Angeles when the protest broke out there. And so we're really excited to get into the weeds there. Another thing we're going to be talking about is a question that's come up lately. Should Black people be supporting Latinos in this time of what many consider to be political persecution? A lot of people have different opinions on that, and we certainly have ours. For longtime listeners, you might have an idea of how we feel about that. But for those just coming to the table, we implore you to stick around and hear our thoughts, because I think we certainly have something to add to that conversation. We're also going to be talking a little later about how Beyonce may have sparked a new awards category when it comes to the Country Music Awards. And so, obviously her album Cowboy Carter was a disruptor last year. It took a lot of folks by surprise. And, the country music community, awards community is reacting to that. So we're going to get into those weeds as well. And then finally, we're going to be talking about former NFL receiver Antonio Brown and some attempted murder charges. So a lot of interesting stuff to stick around for, and so much more. But first, it is time for our Feel Good feature. And today's Feel Good feature comes from the Black Information Network. So big shout out to Seattle Police Chief Sean Barnes, who said he expects to go to jail for standing up for the First Amendment rights of residents amid attacks from the Trump administration against other politicians and protesters. This per KUOW. Protests broke out in Seattle and other cities across the nation in response to anti-ICE demonstrations in Los Angeles. On Monday, June 9th, 300 people marched to Seattle City Hall to rally against the arrest of a union leader during the LA protest. Tuesday, June 10th, protests in Seattle included a gathering outside the Henry M. Jackson Federal Building. Protesters chanted anti-ICE slogans, and a few clashed with police. Trump has responded to protests in LA by threatening California Governor Gavin Newsom and activating the National Guard and the Marines. During a recent Public Safety Committee meeting, Barnes pledged to prioritize the rights of Seattle residents amid the Trump administration's response to protests, noting that he expects to go to jail over the issue. And this is my favorite part. Quote, "I will do everything in my power to protect anyone in Seattle from anyone who comes to the city with the intention to hurt them or inhibit their First Amendment rights." This is what Barnes told council members. He goes on to say, "What that means is that at some point I will probably go to jail and be in prison because we have an administration that threatened to jail politicians and has threatened to jail a governor. The federal government's decision to bring in the military, and I was a Marine, is not warranted," Barnes added. And the reason this is a feel-good feature, don't let me jump in front of you, Q, but I think I can nail this one here, is because this is the sort of courageousness that we like to see from people in positions of power amid a government that is really throwing the rule book out of the window for so many vulnerable populations. And this coming from a police officer is just kind of the master stroke. Now that leads us to segment one. We're talking about what's going on in the culture. So nationwide protest, the No Kings protest. Before I get into, the painting of the picture, how are you feeling, Q, about this past weekend?
I've been kind of operating from a position of hopelessness since Election Day.
Huh?
Nobody's showing up for us. Nobody's fighting back. We're just all watching rights get stripped away, families get torn apart, the Constitution be violated. Some people are kind of offended. No one seemed to be outraged, especially no one in a position to doing anything. Mm. So what's being called the largest protest in 50 something years, I believe, or
Yeah, I heard
The
that.
only time some group of people in every state in the union protested, uh, that gave me some hope,
Okay.
but it was like frustrating hope, right? Like, okay, with this demonstration, like this thing, everybody went outside for a day, and then everybody goes back inside, and everybody goes back to work on Monday, and that dude gets to still be the president. So, at least I know we're not the only two people that are upset.
Okay.
We're not the only two people that are offended. We're not the only two people that took some sort of action and went outside. And I'd have to imagine that everywhere that sense of community helped a lot of people's mental health.
Hmm.
Even though, thinking about the last story, the police and the military being weaponized and federalized against the citizens of the country is a really strange place to be.
Yeah.
And you reflect the last time a president federalized the National Guard, it was to protect citizens, not to attack them.
Yeah.
And this was back during segregation, like even back when we were a less progressive country and we've moved less further down the road to equality and equity. Even then, the president was like, if we're going to send in troops, it's going to be to protect the marginalized, to protect those who might be attacked.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cities during these, marches over the weekend on the No King Day, you actually did see some police forces walking alongside citizens.
Yeah.
And I think it was Chicago in particular, where they were in position specifically to protect those who were doing the protesting
Yeah.
instead of making a wall in front of them and causing this contentious standoff and then inciting violence like we saw in a lot of other cities. You saw the police doing what you'd expect is what they're supposed to do,
Hmm.
and that's standing with the people. So that was refreshing, man. But it's hard to have hope absent any real tangible action, right? Like there's feel goods, but those are temporary. And as far as I'm concerned, everything goes back to normal. People go back to work on
Yeah.
Monday. And again, that dude is still the president.
Well, for the folks that slept through the weekend, maybe weren't made aware of all the goings on, I'm going to share a bit from Reuters to bring everyone up to speed. But I also have a neat story to share. So this is from Reuters. President Donald Trump's long sought military parade rolled through the streets of downtown Washington on Saturday, but the celebration of the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary was marred by a day of violence and discord. In the hours before the parade began, hundreds of thousands of Americans marched and rallied in the streets in the cities from New York to Chicago to Los Angeles, protesting Trump's actions while in office, the largest such action since his return to power in January. Earlier in the day, a gunman assassinated a Democratic lawmaker and wounded another in Minnesota and remained at large. Meanwhile, Israel and Iran exchanged further attacks early on Sunday, stoking fears of a mushrooming conflict between the two nations. All of it followed a week of tension in Los Angeles, where protests over federal immigration raids resulted in Trump calling in National Guard troops and U.S. Marines to help keep the peace over the objections of the state's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. Anti-Trump groups planned nearly 2,000 demonstrations across the country to coincide with the parade. Many took place under the theme No Kings, asserting that no individual is above the law. Okay, so now that we are all brought up to speed, I recognize that, you're right, Q. In a democracy, a duly elected, individual, and I know that there are people who have some concerns about whether or not duly elected applies here, but, follow me. A duly elected individual to the office of the president runs the show for 4 years. That's really it. And if we don't like it, we have to wait 4 years, and then we have to do our civic duty and show up at the polls. This is the nature of the democracy in this country, and we're stuck with it for better or worse. There were a lot of people who didn't like Obama, but they had to deal with him for 8 years. They didn't get to kick him out after one. And so when it swings that way, great. When it swings the other way, it's not great, but them's the breaks, as they say. So So yeah, you're right. He's still the president. Nothing material has changed as a result of these protests. But I learned in 2020 the power of protests. I learned that protests don't, even peaceful protests, can sometimes move people. It doesn't happen easily, but it does happen sometimes. And the more frequent, the larger the protest, the more consistent the protest. Obviously, people need to keep their jobs and they need to appease the people, and there's something there. And to see all of the people outside, in the community of all of those individuals, all their signs, all their frustrations, so forth. It was refreshing to know that not everyone just is sitting at home accepting this. And when there's some organization put forth, there are people who are still willing to get outside and express their frustration with the government and share those frustrations on social media, et cetera. As far as the police, famously, people that follow both of our shows know that we are very critical of the way policing is done in this country. And I think rightfully so. However, when there are stories of police doing their job, especially when normal folks would be afraid, I think we've done a good job of biting those bullets and saying, hey, these police officers did a good job. And personally, I saw this happen in Phoenix during the No Kings protest, because there was a fight at the protest. There was a guy wearing a mask and he had a shirt. It said American Made. This is on my social media at Ramses Jaw if anyone wants to check it out. And after he was picking a fight with somebody, he lost the fight very, very quickly. And then he pulled out a gun in a protest. There's thousands of people here. So he pulls out a gun, and first thing everybody thinks is mass shooting. So everybody starts running, and then that causes everybody else to run, right? And I'm running with people because I don't even know what's happening yet. But as they say, for black folks, if people are running, you ask questions later. You just start running first. So that's what I got on. And then I saw, people gave me this story. There's a guy with a gun over there. And then I saw the police pull up in a truck. A guy jumps out with the chopper on deck, his huge gun. It was about the size of him. And he runs over. They get the guy. They arrest him. They bring him back, and they put him in the back of the car. No one's hurt, and the protest goes on. And everyone was clapping for the officers doing their job, and that felt like a moment of okay, look, there are certain things that we can agree on, right? And in Phoenix is very different from what happened in Utah, because in Utah there was a shooting and someone actually died. And these are from the counter protesters, right? These are the MAGA folks coming out to instigate, and in the case of Utah, end lives. In the case of Phoenix, I don't know if that guy was intending to kill anyone, but he certainly was starting fights, and he had a weapon and he caused a panic. And so, I say we have the right to protest. We have the right to boycott. And these are the things that we're able to do in these 4 years. So we got 4 years to let the people know how we feel. And I think we might be off to a good enough start. All right, moving on. And this is kind of the other side of that coin. Should black people be supporting Latinos right now? And this is something that I remember hearing about. We talked about this before after the election, because we got all the exit polls and we saw the numbers from the Latino community, particularly Latino men. So let me share this just to bring everyone back up to speed. The Associated Press shows that Trump won 43% of the overall Latino vote, which was an 8-point increase from 2020. And here's some additional data. Roughly 70% of Cuban Americans in Florida voted for Trump in the 2024 election. And overall, it's 48% of Latino men, right? So these are some numbers that are very concerning to black folks who I guess historically we felt like, you know, Latinos largely felt kind of the harshest legislation, the harshest I guess approach to our cultures and our humanities from, governments, throughout the history of this country. And we thought that we had like a common plight, a common goal. And so a lot of black people were felt let down by those numbers in the last election. So this question has come up since then. And then, of course, now that there are these ICE raids, there are black people who are saying, hey, look, I'm minding my black business. I'm staying home. Y'all didn't show it for us. So it's not our job to come bail you out, blah, blah, blah. Right. I'll get your thoughts here, but let me share a little bit from one person that I think that we admire him overall. I let the cat out of the bag. I'm not a fan of what he's about to say here, but I think it's important to paint both sides of this picture before we lean into kind of how we feel. And then you, of course, will go first. But this is from Gary Chambers. If you don't know Gary Chambers, look him up. But he's a person that, if you get to know us, you would see why we kind of admire this guy. Anyway, Gary Chambers is on his Instagram post. It says, Black folks don't need lectures. We need other races and backgrounds to hold their own accountable. Over 80% of black voters rejected Trump. Meanwhile, 40 to 50% of some of your own communities helped elect him. And yet the demand is always on us to sacrifice more, do more. We oppose white supremacy, but don't confuse our strategy for survival with silence or support. If we're expected to show up, so should you, starting with your people. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Some have tried to twist my words as divisive. They're not. The data shows that nearly half of certain communities are voting not just against their interest, but ours. And showing up at protests, using the N-word as casually as many do in conversation. Some might let that slide, but where I'm from, it's a no, full stop. Black people are doing the work, educating our people, building power, laying foundation. So to see all this energy aimed at us is wild. And now folks are saying, this isn't the time for this conversation. They say the same thing during the election. So when is the right time to talk about how so many in other communities do direct harm to us as black people? If what I'm saying unsettles you, ask yourself why. There should never be confusion about where black people stand. The real question is, what about the 40%? I'll say again, some of your proximity to whiteness has you focused on the wrong people. The enemy is and always should be white supremacy. We oppose this administration and their actions. Some of the conversation should be with your cousins and elder relatives. So let's get you to jump in here, Q, and just kind of give us your thoughts so far on this.
I see you feeling a way before you read that, but I don't see how you can still feel the same way now. He doesn't at any point say that we shouldn't or that we won't. Mm-hmm. He just says that conversation should start at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
If one out of every two of a certain group voted for what they got, then yeah, there absolutely should be some accountability.
Okay.
Latinos for Trump should be held accountable. Mm-hmm. And so should the much smaller number of black people that supported this white supremacist regime. So I didn't hear him say anything contrary to how everyone should feel. The problem with the idea that we might not participate is that we don't have a choice. So yeah, it's exhausting, but we're at the bottom of said hill. So everything rolling down that hill eventually gets to us. And waiting until everyone else has been wiped out before we decide that we're also in this fight is ridiculous. But I think he's simply saying that the idea that we won't participate or that we're not doing our part or we're not doing our fair share of the work is an insane and ridiculous idea on its face. We showed up on election day at a greater percentage than everyone else, like far greater, opposing what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I told you so. But like you and I have been saying for months, the F around and find out thing is all fine and good on a t-shirt until you realize all of us have to find out
together. Yeah.
It's not just those who supported it. It's not just those who voted in grand numbers against their own best interest that have to find out. We have to find out with them. And we always do.
Well, let me add this because I think that Gary Chambers, he's an elected official, so he had to put it eloquently. But I'm going to share a bit from the Black Information Network. Black voices across the internet are shutting down the dangerous notion that immigration raids are only a Latino issue. Anti-ICE protests have spread nationwide in response to raids and demonstrations in Los Angeles, along with President Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard and Marines. Though the fight against ICE can appear to be solely a Latino issue, the truth is Black people are immigrants too, and so are Latino, and several people have pointed that out online. Black immigrants, including Afro-Dominicans, Afro-Colombians, people from Central America, Haitians, and more, aren't centered in the conversation surrounding immigration raids, but are disproportionately targeted for detention and deportation. Black safety is also at risk due to racial profiling running rampant among ICE agents, ripping people from their homes, jobs, and businesses. And this is the article that goes into more detail about Black people that have come out to support or push back against the Black folks who have really stood on that hill. Not like, Gary Chambers. Gary Chambers said it in a way that he's kind of leaning in that direction. But there are some people who are like angry, right? And I want to take a moment here to say, if I may, that my estimate, and I kind of live in a fanciful butterflies and rainbows type of world, and I hear about it all the time. But I will say this, that there are a lot of people who are at various stages in their journey, various cultures, whatever. And we come from the oldest people in the oldest culture, right? So when we look around white people, and we look around at Latino people, we look at, any other people, pick a person, they are indeed younger than us and still very much on their journey. We are the elder sibling, if you will. And it's okay to have run out of, steam. It's okay to say, you know what, I just don't have it anymore. I need to stay home and protect my spirit, my energy, all that. But to say that Latino people don't deserve our support because of the results of the last election, which is not what Gary Chambers said, but a lot of Black people are saying that. I think that's not only short-sighted, I think it's unkind. And I think that it is inconsistent with the spirit that Black people have shown ourselves to have in this country. The fact is, if we look at the data, most Latinos voted the same way that we did. They voted against what's happening out there. Most of them voted that way. Yes, there was a big divide there, but we saw big divides in not big divides, but we saw a divide in our community, so we know it's possible. Okay. They were more susceptible to it because perhaps colorism and their proximity to whiteness, they perhaps got swept up in it. And yes, they have to find out, and so do we. But I will always maintain that those are our brothers and our sisters. A significant portion of my family is Latino, Mexican. I'm from Southern California. So I grew up with Mexican people my whole life. And California, Arizona is the only two places that I've lived. And, we both have houses in Arizona now. And I just cannot imagine a world where Latino people need us and we don't show up. Because one thing that I saw, and you saw it with me, is in 2020, when we were out protesting, Latino people were out there with us. And of course, no one's trying to paint all Latinos with one stroke, because that's not fair. But I think that just sort of where we are, I think it's important to bear in mind that no matter what, we're in this together and we're stronger together. And so to turn our back on each other, I think that plays right into the hands of white supremacist institutions.
And we always have and always will show up.
Yes. All right. And now the other side of that coin. So it's time for Better Do Better. I'm going to just get right into it. This is from the Miami Herald. Enrique Tario, the former Proud Boys leader from Miami, who President Donald Trump pardoned for his role in the January 6th attack, wants citizens to take deporting undocumented immigrants into their own hands, literally. He has an app for that. Tario has announced he will be the czar of an independent organization that pays people cryptocurrency for reporting undocumented migrants. Enrique Tario, who until recently was serving a 22-year sentence for his seditious conspiracy conviction for his involvement in organizing the January 6th attack, promoted a web app called iceraid.us on his X account. The app crowdsources tips to help law enforcement arrest and deport immigrants. The group, while not affiliated with the U.S. government, aims to support the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration. Quote, I am honored to serve as ICE raid czar and to lead a platform that empowers Americans to protect our nation's values and security, said Tario in a statement. Okay. I'm going to let you have the rest of this. I'm going to just say a couple of things. First thing I want to say, I came across a clip online, and it was a lady on a podcast. And I forget her name. I should have gotten her name. I want to say it's like Angela, something like that. But she's a Cuban lady, right? She speaks with an accent, and the video is making its rounds. I hope you're able to find it. But she's talking about something that I've heard throughout my life. Many people don't know, but I'm part Cuban. I have a grandmother. And so I've been privy to some strange conversations over the years. But she talks about how Cuban people in particular have been kind of chasing whiteness for decades. They think that they're close enough to like actually get there. But Cubans are grouped in with Latinos, and there are a lot of Latino communities that are not Cuban who don't feel that way. They don't feel like white folks will accept them. And nor do they want to be accepted in that way. They want to be who they are. This is why we see Mexican flags in Southern California. They're proud Mexican people who are Californians. And this woman, she has such a profound statement, but basically she says that she's trying to give black folks a pass to say, black folks have shown up. And she's kind of doing the Gary Chambers thing, saying, look, this is something that we need to take care of. Our own community needs to take care of because these ICE raids are affecting us. This guy literally ran on that. And we are always expecting black folks to do this. If we want black folks to show up for us this time, we really need to do some apologizing, right? And I thought that was very kind of her to say, because she's speaking to that facet of black folks who feel very frustrated by our Latino brothers and sisters, right? So I wanted to say those two things. The rest of the time is yours. Talk to me about this Enrique Tario guy and how he needs to do better.
I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? He's kind of who Gary's talking to.
Yeah.
He's not talking to you and I. He's not talking to our Mexican brothers and sisters who marched next to us, through all of these times throughout history where there's been these coalitions of black and brown, not just in LA, but in Chicago and Detroit, and not initially in Arizona, but now in Arizona. You know what I mean? So when I first got to Arizona, black and brown relations were not as good as they needed to be. The King Day was a contentious day because of that. And we've made so many strides. So it's people like this, an Afro-Cuban leading a white supremacist group called the Proud Boys.
Crazy.
And putting money in it to make sure that he criminalizes people who didn't go about it the way he did, which is quote unquote the right way. And because of, the Cuban government and the American government, once upon a time, providing asylum for people fleeing the Cuban government, a lot of Cubans got to come here when it was a more welcoming time. But all you got to do is open their eyes and pay attention. There's enough white supremacists with this agenda for one of their own to not have to be the leader of a group that's putting money behind it. It's things like this that make people say, hey, look at your boy. And please believe we do this to us too. If you think we're not calling to the carpet, black people that are shucking and jiving and tap dancing by the other side, please believe that's happening. So it's not even really about all Hispanic people and all Latino people. It's about these people who are openly and loudly and quote unquote proudly turning on their own people, working against their best interest in the name of proximity to whiteness. Because this isn't just a capitalist endeavor. It's those who want to protect their access to power and whiteness by denying any type of access to any type of resources and freedom and rights to everybody else. So it's a really sad truth to watch unfold in front of our eyes. But here we are, there's people like us that know that we'll never turn our backs on our brothers and our sisters. Unfortunately, this dude is spitting in their face
Yeah.
and his ancestors.
Well, he better do better. How about that?